Now we get Mr. Shepherd, who is taking a new approach, attempting to bring his sheep into the fold.
They want us along for the ride. Pretty cool, eh, gang?
You know he teaches like Western Civ or something. Oh, and also he's reading Brave New World because of course he is. If you get a true thespian, you let him do his thing.
Now, please.
Headbutt, head shatter. Stole that move from Scott Pilgrim. This one is all Andy though. I appreciate that they never make Peter anything he isn't. He hides in every fight right up until his bully shows back up alone. Dang it, this choreography is insane. Always feels so chaotic, but you can tell it's controlled. It has to be with these long takes whipping around the room, which Bradley James Allen was the fight choreographer, and he worked on all the Kingsman movies, so that makes sense now, and Kick-Ass, and like a dozen Jackie Chan films, so it's all coming together now. Also, listen to the way the score blends with Silver Bullet's 20 Seconds to Comply here.
Now.
And I love that once Gary has smashed his first glass in the Mermaid, it's just as usual now.
Humans, this is your final warning.
Bill Nye again?
Let's climb down the drain pipe.
I got a better idea.
This was sort of the replacement for the Never Taken a Shortcut before. And it's so good. But yeah, ultimately it's still in there.
That's why he had his birthmark. He was new, like a baby.
Like a man, baby.
Like a maybe.
By the way, this is the same place they all got para when they were kids.
Steve, in 1987, we were playing cricket and I accidentally pushed you onto a broken bottle that nearly went up your arse. You got that 50cc Suzuki in 1988 and you let me have a go in it and I ran over your leg. In 1986, we reenacted the knife game from Aliens and I stabbed you in the middle finger.
All 4 injuries were done by Gary, further proving how terrible of a friend he's always been. Now we get Peter chucking a second Whitey. Well, first he smashed up Bluey. And fun little detail in the pictures from when they were kids, the last one Peter has disappeared, just like he does now.
We don't want to hurt you.
Retribution? Catharsis? Don't get that one very often, because usually it's just comeuppance, but that's not really the bully, so retribution. Aw, his light literally goes out. Now we start to see how much the network has infected Newton Haven. Infected, improved, whatever.
Let him go! He left you, man! I can't!
Remember what I said about Andrew Knightley? Ha! He crashed the car through the wall at the Hole in the Wall pub. Oh wait. How could I forget this is an Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg movie? Okay, let's see. The first post is just the first bar, so that's a gimme. The old familiar looks exactly like the first post, and also Sam comes by. A familiar is another word for friend, so old friend. The famous cock is literally about Gary, since it's the only bar that knows him. He's famous, and he's been banned for being a crappy guy. The cross hands is where 5 kids attack them, and then they cross hands in a fight. The good companion is the first time Andy drinks a beer with them, and they're all pretty much in sync as good companions are. In the trusty servant, they run into the Reverend Green, the weed dealer, who is actually a trusty servant to the network in the end. Also, the few remaining humans explain some things to them. The 2-headed dog is where the twins attack. The mermaid is where sirens lure them in to steal their DNA. Also, the sign is the marmalade sandwich. The beehive is where they listen to the queen bee, Queen Bond, then kick the nest and a bunch of alien bees attack them. The king's head sign looks like Gary King. Also, he's the only one left drinking at this point. The hole in the wall we covered, and the world's end? Well, the world ends. I think that about covers it. He left through the window.
Is it a window or is it a door? Maybe it's a window.
Also another stolen move from Scott Pilgrim.
I want you inside me.
Don't you know you're in an Edgar Wright movie? We do everything literal around here. More good signs. Love that little string pitch up in the score as if he's finally achieved. Nope, Andy's back. Taps are all network symbols.
Oh, you've got your perfect job and your perfect house and your perfect wife!
She left me, Gary. She took her kids to her mum's 3 weeks ago.
You fight for what's important! For what's so important about the Golden Mile? It's all I got!
And that is soul-crushing, especially on 2nd or 14th viewing. Mental illness and addiction have a stigma in our culture, specifically addiction because it can cause harm to so many people, but you see, we've only been tricked into thinking this is a story about addiction. It's actually so much more about depression, self-hatred, the feeling of failure and not measuring up. Gary King is a jerk. He was a king in high school and never progressed, but the Gary King jerk that we've seen in this movie is nothing but bluster and insecurity. He's broken, and after falling just short of ending it all once, this was his last try to go out in a blaze of glory. And it's amazing what a simple visual cue can do to explain so much. We now know why he had this clinical sounding line memorized.
Bottling up past trauma can lead to inadequate coping strategies in later life, apparently.
And why he wouldn't show his arm scar. But more importantly, his race to complete the Golden Mile makes sense. It was about way more than just drinking 12 pints, although not getting that 12th beer is pivotal to his recovery and continued rebellion. But this was it for him. He never intended to go home. He planned to end his world at the world's end. Blank showing up only solidified his plan.
That feeling like we could take on the whole universe.
I mean, you're about to get your chance. Before we descend into nigh madness, take a gander at the 12 on the sign there for the 12th pub. The 11 in the 11th, 10 in the 10th, 9 in the 9th, 7 in the 7th, 6 in the 6th, Gary's 5 fingers and a 5-pound note in the 5th, 4 in the 4th, 3 in the 3rd, 2 in the 2nd, and a 1 in the 1th. Wondered. Sadly, the only pub that seems to be missing its number is the Mermaid Club, no 8, although Adrian
died in a motorbike accident in Italy 8 years ago.
But as bonuses, the 12th beer is labeled 12, and Gary drinks out of 3 pint glasses outside the 3rd.
Oh my God, I'm so cute.
Compliments.
Nah.
Might seem like a typical irrational Gary action, but stop to consider that Gary is actually killing his younger self, not something he would have done at the beginning of the movie.
Not marveled as information technology has surged forward? No.
That's totally believable, and even Andy agrees. Doom bar.
What is it they say? To err is human. To err is human. So,
So perfect.
who here is human? I am. Don't know for how long.
I'm so glad Filch was spared. I also wonder if maybe he used a little of that Arthur Webley edges and edge to trick the network.
Battle!
A perfect drunk human response.
It's pointless arguing with you.
Andy figured that out like 8 bars ago.
Pointless arguing with you.
It's pointless arguing with him.
It's pointless arguing with you.
Exactly.
You will be left to your own devices.
Really?
Yeah.
So not only did the humans win, but it seems like their vulgarity may have infected the network.
Yeah, shit here, isn't it?
Matt said it in the first and the last pub.
Yeah, here, isn't it?
Depth perception.
You came back for us.
Yes, I did. But yeah, oh, I got lost on the ring road.
More character continuity.
You get lost on the ring road again?
Let's go.
Which way?
Backwards!
And I thought Sam wanted him to go forwards.
There comes a time you have to go forwards, not backwards.
I guess I was wrong. They did paint it red. And obviously Gary is right back where he started again.
I'm sorry.
Wow, that is definitely the first time Gary,
King of the humans.
has ever apologized.
Gary's mum.
Hey, so spoilers for Shaun and Hot Fuzz, but what's the deal with mums, Edgar and Simon? In Shaun of the Dead, the main plot thread is kicked off because Shaun goes to save his mum. In Hot Fuzz, Danny's mom's suicide is what makes the town go all murdery, and now the only way that Gary convinced Andy to come out was lying about his mum's death.
I knew a few of them. Some guy from work, cousin Paul.
Ha, I guess Gary won't have to pay back Paul after all.
I still owe Paul.
We all had to go organic in a big wave.
I'm sitting here eating a drumstick, best US cornetto approximation, and I can tell you I'd miss him too. But it's a happy ending for Andy since that was one of the reasons his wife left him in the first place. Aw, Gary said he was all mouth.
Really, he was all math.
But it looks like he got rid of that birthmark after all.
Stephen and Sam got together in the end.
Now that's a happy ending, especially since Andy lost Tina to Andy. By the way, the rising sun is number 13, so technically Gary just kept the crawl going. Gary finally found a life worth shaving for.
5 waters, please.
And he now believes what Andy said earlier about ordering water at a bar.
Full of big ugly bastards wearing war paint. That, my friend, takes confidence, yeah?
Me? They call me the king.
And he's even got Excalibur from the looks of it. Her age was her most mentioned characteristic.
She's a fitness instructor, 26.
Currently seeing a fitness instructor. She's 26 years.
Before we get into it, one of my favorite things that we get with these part 2 videos is that I get to read your comments on part 1 and see the things that I missed. And one of the ones that's really great is about how gory this movie is, but you don't even notice because it's blue, and it was a really smart move. Also, I learned that "oh crumbs" is just a normal British expression, so that's a good lesson for me. Also, it's possible evidence that Sam and Oliver just weren't allowed to swear by their parents, which is why he also says WTF all the time. And the last one is that Gary takes a break from driving to play Need for Speed. Edgar and Simon always put so much thought into these stories. There are definitely things we all miss on the first and second viewings, and even after a dozen, you'll still be noticing something new. For instance, the use of color is something that took me forever to see. The blanks are all wearing blue and green, and as we get towards the end of the movie, you'll notice blue and green popping up in more and more places. Oliver and Peter are wearing blue and green from the beginning, which is a signal that they're going to be blanks eventually. Speaking of their deaths, the order in which the group walks is always the same. Oliver and Peter on the outside, so that when they die, the group will still look alright with only the three musketeers left. Although I'll say that even when Gary isn't there, they stay in formation. And I know there are even more details, like Andy asks for hard evidence that he's human.
Better come up with some hard evidence that you're human.
So Gary slams his hard head against the beam. Like I said, Gary didn't want to show his arm scar because he didn't want anyone to see the bandages, but that's also the main reason he wears the duster the entire night, and why he wears a shirt with thumb holes so his sleeves won't get pulled up. I also love how often you can see blanks in the background just standing around or doing their routine. The more you look at the background, the more you'll notice they're often just staring. All that said, this movie's emotional core works because of the two movies leading up to this one. Usually Nick is the goofball and Simon is more grounded, but their friendship is always the same. Anyone even casually paying attention can tell that Simon and Nick are friends IRL. And it gets me when Gary finally admits how important this is to him because he feels like he has nothing else. It actually stings to see them fight like this, and even a little more that they don't end the movie together. Honestly, the sadness at the end is the only thing that keeps me from loving this movie as much as the other two. That said, I'll admit that I love how it's actually consistent characterization. Gary is a pretty toxic dude. He proves that entirely by choosing the younger, blanker versions of his friends in the end. Still, it's sweet that he gets to stay stuck in the past with them, right where he wants to be. A big thing the movie delves into is how you can never go home again. But since it's a Simon and Edgar movie, they flipped the idea on its head. The rote message in a film like this would be that you can't go home because you're not the same person you were when you left. But Gary is the same. Failure to launch is his whole thing. So instead of coming to the realization that growing up is the only course of action, Edgar and Simon used aliens hell-bent on making the world better so that home is the same. Gary still moves past it in his own way. I covered most of everything else I wanted to talk about in the main section. Still, I just can't get over how Simon and Edgar tie the entire narrative and central theme together, especially with what could have been a wacky sci-fi trope-filled second half. This is a movie about a man who won't change, won't grow up, and he's come home to relive his glory days only to find out that many things have changed. And then he finds out that the reason everything is different is that an alien who wants to change him is responsible. The other four men all assimilated to adult life, to modern life. That's what the network wants, and it took Gary repeating the Primal Scream sample from The Wild Angels, both figuratively and literally, for Andy to realize that parts of Gary's life philosophy might actually save them.
We want to be free! We want to be free to do what we want to do! We want to get loaded! And we want to have a good time!
Or they're just too drunk to realize that intergalactic communities would be fun. I don't know, the movie doesn't really make a judgment, only that you can't bend humans to your will so easily. We all watch the homogenization of things that used to be interesting. There isn't a whole lot we can do about it. It's that
Starbucking, man.
And if it wasn't for Gary, Steven would never have proclaimed,
Yeah! Stop f***ing Starbucking us, man!
And this was 8 years ago. Smartphones and franchising and the
nationwide initiative to rob small, charming pubs of any discernible character
have all become even more prolific. And the idea that things becoming easier and more convenient could be hiding something more sinister, well, I don't need to get all preachy. I think progress can be great. And I don't think there's a pseudo-benevolent yet murderous alien federation of planets trying to induct us with goals somewhere between first contact while observing the Prime Directive and force assimilation into the hive mind. But I also won't pretend like my Twitter bubble is perfect for my brain. Anyway, come for the sci-fi, stay for the friendship and chuckles. I'm sad to be done with the Blood and Ice Cream trilogy. It's a special one. One thing I haven't done is watch all 3 of them in one sitting, so I'm gonna have to do that sometime. And I might even have to break my general horror rules for Last Night in Soho, but we'll have to see. At this point, I think I'd watch just about anything from Edgar Wright, so. But next week, that new thing that I was talking about last week, that's just about impossible to show a teaser frame for without spoiling it. But I guess if you immediately get this, then this will just up your hype for next week. I don't know. And if you have no clue, then prepare to be surprised. Either way, I'll see you next week.
Yes, Gary.